pain to your core when you're breaking out in hives is not normal.
Yeah.
It might be common, but that means that there's a lot of people with a lot of issues. And
Right.
I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be one more person that makes it go okay for doctors to say, oh, it's common.
I asked to speak to you today, and exactly because um, we got in communication last week, and you let me know some pretty profound um, aspects of your health that have improved over the last few weeks and months,
Mhm.
um, that very much related to the environment that you were living in. And it was just so clearly, um, almost night and day, how stark the improvement was and how dramatic it was, that it it alerted to me. It's like, this is a great example, because this happens in our or the way you presented was like, this happens in our patients, that I'm here trying to say, like, we have to understand your environment, we have to take that into consideration. And some people are very, I don't know if they're reluctant, or they're just not fully aware that it can have such a dramatic impact on our kind of current health and well-being. So, Gina, give me an understanding, and like, let's recap a little bit about just what was going on in your health. And first off, I will say thank you for actually spending the time to do this with me, because we've already done it once, so now doing it again. But it paints a beautiful picture that I think is worth other people knowing. So, um, you know recap a little bit about like what was going on health wise, and taking up space on your plate, not that long ago.
So we moved. It was pretty much New Year's Eve was our last day there. We sold our house on, it was the day before New Year's, and um, we were there for 19 months. And since the time that we moved in, and now in retrospect, I look back and I go, hey, all of that was related.
Mhm.
I've always had 20/20 vision. I'd be sitting on the floor with my son and I'd look up at the clock and I'd be like blurry. Like, this is weird. Like, I've never had that. I'd go to the eye doctor. Hey, what's going on? I'd get headaches. Oh, I guess I'm just, I'm a new mom. I'm stressed. I'm whatever. And everything had an excuse to it. Everything was a different reason. And I never put it together.
A
Until
reason from you, or a
a
reason
reason
from
from
someone
me,
else?
a reason from doctors, whatever we could say, oh, well, you're on the computer. I know I'm an executive admin, so I'm on a computer quite a bit.
Mhm.
Oh, you're reading. Oh, you got your master's, so your eye, you're constantly on a computer. There's so many excuses to why these things are happening. But
Well, I'll interject. Excuses is one word. Potential reasons is another, right? But what this is going to illuminate, I think, to other people, is why you often need to look a little harder, because at the surface value, those are not always good enough,
yeah,
especially if they don't get better.
it's easy to accept what you're being told by a professional
Yeah.
and stop advocating for yourself. And
Mhm.
it's really easy to fall into that and believe what you're being told because of the letters that come before or after someone's name.
Yep.
And there's this idea out there like, oh, you got your Google degree. It's like, well, maybe I did, maybe and maybe I had to here.
Yeah.
But I was there for 19 months, and I look back and I go, hey, all this stuff is starting to clear up because I moved. This doesn't make
Mhm.
sense. But what was really pivotal was it was April of 2020. I was sitting there having dinner with my husband, and I felt this itch, and I was like, oh, that's weird. And I touch my hip, and I feel these bumps. Like, that's odd. I have hives. Like,
Mhm.
oh well, I guess I'll take a Benadryl. Took a Benadryl, went away. Happened again the next night, a little bit worse. I was like, that's odd. And I just kind of didn't know. I'd had hives when I was really young. I had a reaction to a combination of like peanuts and citrus and chocolate all together. It was like a weird reaction. Happened one day, took a Benadryl, never happened again. But this came up and it kept coming up every night. And every night I would be taking Benadryl. And I was like, this isn't right. So I met with an allergist, and I got this, oh, well, here's some prednisone, just take this. Like, but I don't want to take prednisone. I want to know why it's happening. You
Right.
know, I want to know the why behind it. And I'm not somebody that's really big into just taking prescriptions or taking any type of a drug.
Yeah.
And even taking Benadryl was really hard for me to like swallow that and be like, oh, I have to take this every night. This is weird. I don't like it. So I started just kind of exploring those options with the allergist, and his answer was really, you know, try this and come back in a week. And I said, well, what else can we do? He said, well, try Zyrtec and Benadryl. Okay, fine. So now I'm on antihistamines morning and night,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm working full time, and I'm trying to take care of a kid, and the situation was getting worse and worse and worse. And the hives at that point, you know, 3 weeks in, are head to toe hives every single night, pretty much all day. Antihistamines not covering it, and I just didn't understand why.
Yeah.
And I started to hear from the allergist. I started seeing my general practitioner, and I'm getting this answer of, you know, it's really common. You know, this happens a lot of times. It happens. They'll go away like they came, you know, okay, well, it's been over 6 weeks. Oh, well, now we can stick, you know, chronic urticaria on it. Okay, well, that's nice that you have this diagnosis of a large rash. That's why I came here. And so I just didn't like the answer that no one was giving me. And they said, oh, well, it's common. It happens. It happens. Just because something's common doesn't mean that it's normal. And I think that also sometimes gets lost on people, is that you might not be alone in that situation you're in. And that can find you a little bit of comfort sometimes, to know that there's other
Right.
people going through it. But it doesn't find you comfort that other people are as miserable as you are. And
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that no one's body is telling them something. Your body is screaming at you
Right.
because
And it's
something.
not good enough. But I mean, like, okay, misery likes company, but if we could be better or different, that should be the goal, not oh, well, you're not the only one.
Yeah. And I was finding friends were actually going through similar things, and I'm finding all these stats of how common things are. And I joined these Facebook support pages, and in all honesty, it was not helpful, because it was people that were just miserable and were happy that other people were miserable with them. and,
Mm-hmm.
and
Right.
sometimes you just need to vent, because every bit of your body is miserable. I was feeling gut symptoms. My gut felt constantly just wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and my head was clouded. I couldn't keep my train of thought straight. I got to a point after, 8 months of this, towards around like months 4, 5, 6, 7, where I noticed that my brain fog was so severe that I was not able to complete sentences.
Yeah.
And that's not normal. And
Right.
feeling pain to your core when you're breaking out in hives is not normal.
Yeah.
It might be common, but that means that there's a lot of people with a lot of issues. And
Right.
I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be one more person that makes it go okay for doctors to say, oh, it's common. It shouldn't be
So
common.
then, so then when in that grand scheme of things, because I don't remember exactly the timeline, when exactly did you and I meet in that kind of framework of symptoms? Because the only thing, or not the only thing, but the one thing I very much remember was a picture that you sent of me, or to me, of the expressions of hives and swelling on your face.
Yeah. Yeah, so my first severe angioedemas came up. It was Father's Day of 2020, because I didn't get to go to any of the celebrations that were happening with my family, because I was just wanting to hide myself under blankets the entire day. I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to be seen. And I had no energy for it. And that night, my parents had to come pick me up so that my husband could stay with our son, because my lip was swelling so severely that it was starting to fall open. And we didn't know, it wasn't my tongue, it wasn't my throat yet, but we didn't know what was to come. And that was around like
Right.
9, 10 o'clock at night. So we needed somebody that could rush me to the ER. And, my husband had my son. So my parents came and picked me up, and it just kept swelling, and it was just completely falling open. I couldn't take enough Benadryl to make it stop. I was trying, and it just kept going. And by the morning, my whole face was still swollen. My eye was swollen shut. My lip was hanging open. and it started to come down as the day went on, and I was taking my antihistamines, and I was, I drank coffee, and for some reason coffee would help. And I think it's because my liver was impacted so severely, and that would help kind of flush the liver a little bit. I don't know, but for some reason, a little bit of coffee would help. And, then I later learned that I was actually drinking a really moldy coffee. So I've since switched my coffee.
Right.
No,
Circle back to that, but yeah.
Yeah. So there's so much that, at the time I didn't realize it was my environment. But, what made me start thinking about the environment was it was March or April timeframe of last year where we got really, really heavy rains. And I was in a new house. We hadn't even been there a year. And we noticed a leak. And the first time it rained, we saw the water at the baseboard, and we were like, oh, that's weird. But our son had just started drinking with sippy cups, and we were like, oh, he probably like slipped and his sippy cup hit the baseboard.
Right. Was it a new build too, Gina?
It was brand new.
Right. I get this all the time too, where they're like, no, it can't be. Like, I live in a new house.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I've heard that, and I go like, well, I believe you'd like to think that, like, but here's the situation. Anyways.
Yeah. Well, and it's a good point, because what I learned about new builds, and I tell people that, so I had mold exposure at my last house, and they go, oh yeah, I was living in an old house once too. I'm like, no, it was a brand new house. But what I've learned actually is that mold is actually really common in new builds. It's almost more common because they're throwing these houses up so quickly that they're putting in green materials. So all the lumber still has moisture to it, and they lock that into the walls. So you need to be really cautious with a new house, because one, you have the fact that the lumber that framed the house probably still has carrying moisture. Two, what time of year was it built? My house, for example, was built actually during a rainy season. So all of that lumber that was already wet then got even wetter, and then they put drywall up over it.
Right.
How's that supposed to dry out? It's probably not. The other thing
is
insulate
it too, to keep it moist and damp.
Yeah. And then you have to think about the off-gassing too. Yeah. So for a lot of people, the paints they're using, the drywall, the glues, everything that goes into a house you end up off-gassing it. A lot of this stuff is coming and it's not off-gassed. So then you're breathing all that in. So actually new builds, you got to be really cautious with them now that I've known all this. But the interesting thing about my situation was that it really wasn't my house. Right. It ended up not being the physical house itself. And what made me think originally about mold, which kind of led me to this discovery that it was the air surrounding my house, was, seeing that moisture. And I posted to a Facebook page for my community. And I said, hey, does anyone else have this? And someone else had posted, and they're like, yeah, you know what? I actually have mold. I'm covered in mold. She had the same floor plan as me, and she was 3 houses away. And I was like, whoa, same leak, same floor plan, same rain, same issue, but you got mold. And I asked her, I said, well, do you run your AC? Because we run our AC. And we had checked, we'd done moisture checks, and it had dried out. And we ran our AC all the time. She didn't. She kept her windows open. I said, well, that's odd. Well, so we did a mold test just to make sure, because then, upstairs we found some moisture in a wall near the bathroom. Like,
I remember you telling me that there was moisture, but the testing all came back not that exciting inside the house.
And we actually ended up cutting open the wall, because I just didn't accept it as an answer, because the more I was diving into this, I was like, you know what, my symptoms, it's mold exposure. Like, it has to be. And it's no, at that point I had found you, and you actually, you were talking to me about like, hey, this is a possibility. You were open to what I had to say. And
that's sometimes what people need to, because here's the thing is, like, I'm not a building specialist. I'm not a mold remediation specialist, but I know how these symptoms show up. And then when your case kind of came across, I was like, man, it just smells of exposure. Yep. And then the resulting impacts that has on the physiology. So the $1 million question then is, well, is it? And then if it is, well, where?
Yeah.
And that's luckily, at least you were primarily at home.
Yes.
Right. If I believe you were working from home.
Yeah. So
we maybe met during COVID, right?
Yeah. So COVID hit, And I thought, hey, you know what? At my business, we have this culture of, be outside. We live in Southern California. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do that. I'm going to make this feel okay. I'm going to get vitamin D. I'm going to sit outside and get fresh air. And I bought myself a hammock, and I got my son a little water toy, and I could bring my computer out and he could play around. And then on nap, I'd go sit outside for his hour and a half nap. And I just sit out there and enjoy it and work outside. Well, after we did this mold test, we looked and we were like, oh, that's not exciting. Okay. I went back to it though, because I just couldn't get this off my mind. I couldn't accept that there's no mold anywhere when my symptoms were presenting like mold exposure. And I looked back and I remember having this moment of, oh my God, I didn't look at the outside air that they test as a control sample. And the control sample was 6 times higher than the allowed amount, even for outside. And my jaw just hit the floor.
Right.
That's it. That's it. And that's when I contacted you and I said, this has to be mold exposure. Here's what I found. This is crazy high. And I showed it to some environmental safety friends at work. They were floored. So I started doing a lot of research on what the area used to be, because it is new construction. And I found out it was an orange grove. So I started obviously diving into that research, and you find out that the molds that were extremely high on the test, the air test, were the exact molds that impact citrus. So most likely what they did is they turned the soil, and it was a live soil that had the mold growing in it.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're all living on top of mold. And wind kicks up, and I'm sitting outside thinking I'm getting fresh air.
Yeah.
It wasn't fresh at all. It was moldy air. And it made me sick. And it was within 3 weeks of me sitting outside like that, doing that after COVID and getting that fresh air, that I started showing symptoms. And it all kind of came together. So that's when you had me do the test through Great Plains Lab.
Yeah.
It confirmed everything. It lined up exactly with the outside mold air. It made so much more sense. And I remember going and getting that test from you and just like screaming for joy, because I was so happy that I had this definitive answer finally, after hearing, oh, well, it could be a parasite. Oh, well, it's just hives. It'll just go away.
Yeah. Cause if I recall correctly, you'd been through some folks in our like naturopathic functional medicine realm too. I can't discount how useful that is for me though too, right? Because when when you get someone who's already had some other smart people put their 2 cents into it, well, you don't sit and do the same thing. You say, okay, well, this poor person is still suffering, so what else can you look at? And all of those things ended up falling into place. I think the really valuable piece for me, or to be able to see, is that outside of you like leaving that area, it wasn't exactly a smooth execution of a treatment plan. It really wasn't. I mean, there were times where you were messaging me being like, Derek, like, I am not good.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here being like, oh my gosh, like, what, like, how do I help this poor girl, but also like trying to just say like you gotta dig, and you came with an incredible fire for information, right? You did. You had a lot of fire already, and that, I think, was the most important piece, was that you weren't going to settle.
Right. And I knew that when I came to you, and I think I said it in my intake forms, I knew when I came to you, I did not want somebody to just tell me their thoughts on it. I wanted someone that was going to partner with me. And I was pretty blunt with you. I said, if you don't know this and you don't think you can fix me,
right, bye.
Just don't lie to me. Don't give me false hope.
Yeah.
Just be straight with me, and I'll be straight with you.
Yeah.
And when you were accepting to that, and at that point, I mean, I had done it all. I'd seen so many people.
Yeah.
Really, like 15 different doctors and naturopaths and chiropractors and acupuncturists. I mean, I was doing Reiki. I was, talking angels. Like, I was doing it all. I was
right
out, and I was just sick of it. And I knew that like I was getting at a poor mental state too. Like, it was draining.
you can
And
only focus so hard, so intensely for so long before you like one need a break, but also before it can really be demoralizing. And there are, I mean, there are sick people out there who are chronically unwell, and they, I mean, and it's challenging to even imagine being in those shoes. I mean, you did get to walk in those boots, and luckily you figured out a way to be able to take them off too. And it certainly, I'm sure, gave you some perspective on just what it what it feels like to be unwell,
yeah.
without a understanding of maybe why.
Hmm.
um, and I just think that your, I mean, you're, again, like I said, your kind of fire and drive to figure that out was incredible. But then also hearing all the action you took, right? Like that's the thing, is like you didn't sit back and like think about, you're just like, look, if this is a problem, I gotta fix it.
Yeah.
And you cut your house open, you
Hmm.
sold, like you got rid of it, you moved,
That was it.
right?
I remember that excitement of that diagnosis lasted about 4 seconds when I realized, oh shit, I have to move.
I gotta move,
That's
yeah.
the
And
next call was to my real estate agent.
yeah,
And I was like, we're getting it listed. That's it.
yeah,
And we took pictures within about 2 weeks. We had pictures and listed, and that was it. We moved over the holidays basically. We were in escrow right after Thanksgiving, and we negotiated just to stay. We wanted to keep it through, not that we wanted to stay, but we were trying to also create a good Christmas for my son. And
of course, yeah, yeah,
so we wanted to stay through the holidays at least. So I knew that meant, a couple weeks delay on my treatment. But at that point, I had to think about my son too and what's best for
yeah.
him. And that was
Well,
ultimately the decision we made. But, 3 weeks after being out of the house, I was feeling better. And I think it was, I don't think it was just being out of the house. I really think that it was the detox that you and I were doing.
mhm, yeah,
And
sure.
I think that, you can move and it's going to take a long time to detox. I had stayed out of the house a couple of times. We had moved out for about a week or so. And that week didn't really do much because we didn't know the diagnosis at that point.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I couldn't actively be working to fix anything. And I think what I've learned with mold exposure, it's not going to go away on its own. It'll go dormant for a little bit. It's going to come back. It's still there. Um, you
Well,
know,
the susceptibility to what mold and mycotoxins, like that are kind of released from mold, right? Which is really, I mean, that's what we pick up on the urine test. It's they are the pieces that suppress our immune system function or cause the immune dysregulation. They suppress regular detoxification. They suppress, anti-inflammatory pathways. So it's this mycotoxin overwhelm, and undoubtedly behind the scenes in some genetic reality, like you have a few pathways that are a little bunged up, right? We all have our susceptibilities, and then our environment and our exposures, and then
yep,
stressors, which can be perceived psychological, which can be physiological, environmental, or whatever. They weigh down on some of those weak spots.
yeah,
I call them like the genetic potholes. And we're just driving along the road, and there are some times in which it's inevitable to run over a pothole. But if there are environmental influences or stress influences that are taking the wheel and making us hit every single one, your car is going to break. And
yeah.
that's kind of what we ended up seeing in you. So, like, yeah, are there still susceptibilities in that physiology? Yes. But if they're not being so pushed on from the outside, that person can live in much greater harmony and health. And I mean, you're living that right now. So how did, over since you moved and got out of the moldy arena, like how did things get better? Did they like very quickly get better? Did they slowly change, or like how did that show up for
It
you?
was pretty slow. When we moved out, I was still under stress. We were living with my
Mhm.
in-laws, and so I was still, stressed about the move and not knowing exactly when we were going to get into the new house because we were offering a rent back and doing some work on it and stuff like that. Um, and so I was still under stress, and I think that it started to like almost resurface. I got like a little nervous one day that it was resurfacing, but for the most part, I mean, I was on 4 Zyrtec a day when I was at my worst.
Hmm.
4 Zyrtec and Benadryl and everything that I could do to suppress everything going on. And I was like a zombie.
Mm-hmm.
And I got down to a point where it was basically, I would think about it a little bit. I'd maybe take a half a Zyrtec and it'd be fine. And then it got to a point where I started forgetting. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I forgot to take my Zyrtec and I'm
Mm-hmm.
fine.
Yeah.
And that was so exciting when I realized one day that I forgot it and
Yeah.
then I didn't have to think about it. And
Right.
then I didn't have to think, oh my gosh, okay, it's 8 a.m. I have to take my Zyrtec. Okay, it's 8 p.m. I
Right.
have to take my Zyrtec. And I was able to like have energy and sleep. And I'd wake up feeling actually refreshed because I wasn't sleeping. I was miserable 24/7.
Right. Right.
And when I started waking up and being like, oh, I actually feel pretty good. And no, I don't have any hives. I'm not going to take any Zyrtec. I don't need it. I'm good.
Right.
And I just kind of stayed with my detox and I kept going on it. And I just it just slowly, after a few weeks, I was just like, I'm done. I don't need the Zyrtec. I don't
Mm-hmm.
have the swelling, thank God. I don't have the
Yeah.
hives, thank God.
Yeah.
And I can sleep and I can remember stuff. I can
Yeah.
finish my sentences. I don't
Right.
zombie and I don't have pain down to my core every single day.
Yeah.
And I can, walk up the stairs without being completely winded. I can work out without feeling pain,
Mm-hmm.
true pain in my joints. I mean, it was like every bit of my body started like coming back to life. And things I didn't even realize were part of it, like my joint pain. I was
Mm-hmm.
just like, yeah, it's there. I didn't realize how bad it was until it started to get better because I gotten so used to living that.
Yeah.
And it's like I accepted part of it. I accepted that like some of this is it's just how it is.
Yeah.
I
I use an analogy called the dirty bucket analogy. It's like if you have a bucket of dirty water, an extra tablespoon of water, sorry, an extra tablespoon of dirt in that muddy water, you can't tell. But if
yeah,
your bucket is full of clean water and you put a tablespoon of dirt in there, you can see every single particle of
yeah,
that tablespoon of dirt. And and so many people are just used to feeling ugh,
yeah,
and so they don't know what good feels like.
right.
And that is one of the most, I mean, that to me is one of the most fun things, to be able to get someone who's lived 30, 40, 50, 60 years just kind of eh. And
Yeah,
then all of a sudden they're, 65 years old and they're saying, I've never felt this good in my life. And that's there's like a mixture of like amazing and sad
yeah,
all at the same time, but at least they're achieving that, and they're getting to realize like, oh, this is what it can be like, and that's really cool. So
yeah.
um
I mean, even now, like I feel like I like lost that year of my life. Like
mm,
I really feel like I lost it.
mm,
We wanted to grow our family in that time, and instead I was wondering why my face is swollen like a
yeah,
monster.
yeah,
My son would look at me sometimes, and he's 2 now, so he was just after his first birthday, and he understood that something was wrong, and he would
yeah,
point to my eye or my lip and say owie, and it was like, yeah, mommy has an owie, like,
yeah.
you know
Well, and that picture, I mean, one of the pictures you sent me of your face swollen, it looked like you got beat up.
yeah,
It was, and that was, I mean,
it
that
looked
wasn't the
like I lost
first.
the fight.
Yeah, yeah, you definitely lost that one.
Yeah,
And if I recall correctly, it wasn't even the first time that had happened. You just suffered through that one. You didn't go to the urgent care. You didn't go to the emergency. You're like, they're not going to do anything for me. You just
nothing to offer me. I
and
knew
when
I knew that they had nothing to offer me.
when I got that message back from you, uh, like my I had a couple of thoughts. Medically was, whoa, okay. Second was, this girl's a badass. Uh, those were the two battling thoughts, and both professional. Um, and because I assure you, anyone anywhere near me showed up looking like that, that's where we would be in a heartbeat. And I mean, I guess the calculated reason is, well, this isn't the first rodeo, and secondly, you were not responding well to what they had given you,
And
right?
I knew that by going to the ER at that point, we were in peak COVID. I was going to have to separate from my entire family for 2 weeks. And I was already stressed out enough. I needed my husband. I needed my son. I couldn't do that. And
Mm-hmm.
so, going there was, to me, it just kind of seemed pointless. But I will
Right.
tell you, everything I went through, I gave birth to my son natural, completely
Mm-hmm.
natural. What I went through, I would give birth every single day before I go through that again.
Wow. That's poignant. So, well, let's end on this. I want to hear uh, if you have any nuggets of advice for. I mean, there's a lot of different aspects that that you actually understand aspects of this process differently than I do. While I've seen lots of people like have it, you had it, right? Like you lived it, you operated through it, you sleuthed a lot through this. So what you've learned about maybe environmental exposure and mold wise, um, do you have any insights on that arena as well?
Yeah. Gosh, I feel like there's so much to say here.
Yeah.
You know, I think that, like I said, something being common doesn't mean it's normal. Listen to your body. And if your body is screaming at you, or even just like hitting you, like, hey, something doesn't feel right, I have pain here, or I don't feel well here, or anything is repeating, I have this headache that won't go away for a week,
Mhm.
listen to your body and trust yourself. And if somebody says something's common and oh, this happens all the time, that's probably a red flag that you should understand that that's probably still not right. It's okay to not accept an answer from somebody based on the letters before or after their name. That's okay. You can
Yeah.
reject those answers if you know in your gut something's wrong. Listen to your gut.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I think that that's probably the biggest thing. You have to be
Yeah.
an advocate for yourself. And if somebody's not willing to partner with you and they're talking down to you or they're just talking at you,
Hmm.
that's also a red flag that you're just in the wrong place and you're not
Right.
getting the care that you need. And you need to find someone that's willing to partner with you. Um, as far as environment goes, it's really scary to think what our environments can do to us. And just because you're in a new house or just because you're in an area that no one else is sick, it doesn't mean anything. You know, my husband and my son lived in the exact same environment as me, and they weren't as sick as I was. There's things now that they're realizing being out of there. We notice a difference with my son's sinuses,
Mhm.
and we notice a difference with my husband's sinuses, his headache, and his gut. And they were extremely mild symptoms, but he was one of those people that kind of accepted that, oh, well, it's just a little bit, or it only happens, Friday through Sunday when I'm home. And it's like, just because it's only mild or it's not greatly impacting your life, where, I was knocked on the floor every day.
Mhm.
If you're not feeling that way and it's just a little bit, there's still something wrong. Whether it's something you're eating, whether it's something in your air, in your house, something. There's something wrong and you need to get to the bottom of it. And I think that also understanding that mold exposure is so serious that even if you're around it, it's still impacting your body, whether you're presenting all those symptoms like I did or not.
Mhm.
And understanding your environment, where was your house built? What was there before? And what, air purifiers can do wonders. Stick
Mhm.
an air purifier in your house and look at the vent in a month. Because that's what I did. And it was
Yeah.
scary to think about what was being captured in that vent when you change them every 3 to 6 months. Change it every month. See what it's
Yeah.
like. Because you might be living in something that you're not seeing it, but it's there.
Right.
So I'd say, trust your gut. Find someone that'll partner with you. Don't be afraid to continue to move along. One thing, I didn't want a doctor hop. And I thought, well, that's just crazy. This guy's great. I'll just work with that person.
Mhm.
But I had it wrong. He was taking
Yeah.
shots in the park. He was saying, oh, this is normally what it is. Don't fall for that. Don't be another number. Let someone and yourself truly understand what's wrong.
And
But
yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I think those are just important things to hear from uh, someone who's not in medicine, right? Like this isn't, you're not a doctor. You're
no,
not in medicine. Like
I'm
this
not.
is just from real life just experience there. And so thank you, thanks for sharing that. I think that if we get this out to people who want to hear it, like, just your story is wonderful. So thank you so much for sharing it.
You're welcome. I hope
On
it helps one person. I mean,
Yeah,
that would be
it
awesome
will.
because I can't even imagine still
Well,
being mad and not
you've
having answers.
helped people. You've helped people in my practice, because what I tell a lot of my patients is that, I mean, I get to be better because of patients. Like, I get to be better because of everybody who comes in the door, right? You don't download experience. You
Yeah.
acquire it, right? And that's where that's why I value having a relationship with my patients in a very real sense, because um, they are going to help my next ones, and my next ones are going to help my next ones, because they allow me to get another little nugget of practice, exposure, learning something new, hitting a home run, swinging and striking out, so that you can start to put that together, right? And especially when you get something like mold exposure, mycotoxin exposure, which presents with and can present with literally almost anything. Um, if you don't have your antennae up to be able to, like, filter all of that and put those pieces together, you'll miss it. And are there other things that are, come to our minds first? Yeah, and this is where I said I got to learn from other people who had already checked off a lot of boxes in your
Yeah.
case, right? So, and unfortunately, for some types of conditions, like, that's just one that ends up having to go through a few people, because, well, it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, but it's some sort of dinosaur,
Yeah.
and like, that's the piece where it's like, well, most people, 95% of people, are going to think it's a duck,
Right.
and you can't blame them. But at the same time, it's like, you could show up to be like, okay, it's not a duck. It's got to be something different.
Yeah.
So thank you, right? Because and even in everybody who you did pass through and didn't get well, you did help them grow, or think about things differently. You did. Look, I mean, we try to help everybody, and at times, we come up short in medicine, right? But this was a case that I think your persistence and your participation and your passion um, helped you get well. And so I think it's just really a great story. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you. And thank you
Cool.
for partnering with me, because I don't think that I could have had somebody that truly understood what or listened to what I was saying, and that's, I think, the biggest difference with you is,
Cool.
I think that looking at an environment stops with, well, do you have a dog or a cat? It's a bit more than that. It's a
Yeah.
bit more than my dog that I've had for 5 years and that I grew up with the exact same breed. It's just a
Right.
little deeper than that.
Right.
And I
Right.
think that, for a lot of people, when I said, oh, there's no mold inside, that was it. And granted,
Mm-hmm.
that was it for me until I really read the report. But
Mm-hmm.
I think with anyone else, I never would have felt comfortable even pursuing, hey, you know what, let's go back to this mold thing because of this. And you were willing to do that. And you were willing to listen to, hey, there's mold outside. Could it be? And
Yeah.
you were willing to understand, hey, you know what? Yeah, it could be. It
Yeah.
definitely could be. So,
Yeah. It made a lot of sense once those, like, proper dominoes ended up being in place. But you deserve most of the credit and doing a lot of the work there. So thank you.